Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilden is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 6 of my one night in Karazhan card review. A ton of cards were just revealed leading up to the adventure. I've got 6 to look at in this video, but stay tuned very shortly for upcoming videos with the remaining cards. This time around, I'm taking a look at specifically the Priest cards and the Shaman cards. Priest, of course, because we've all been waiting for Priest to get some good cards to make a return to the metagame. Unfortunately, I don't think Karazhan is going to make Priest good, so let's jump in and see what I mean. The first new Priest card we're going to talk about is the Onyx Bishop. This is a 5 mana minion that's got 3/4 in stats, so right off the bat, not great stats for a 5-drop. That's something you typically want to see on a 3-drop. You might be okay with it on a 4-drop if the effect is really strong. This does have a good effect, but still only 3/4 for 5. It's awfully weak on its own. The effect is a battle cry, summon a friendly minion that died this game. So this is essentially a 3-drop that has Resurrect built right into it, which is pretty cool. The unfortunate problem with that, right, is that the great thing about Resurrect is that you can kind of slot it into a turn and do other things. You can Shadow or Death, and you can Resurrect. And then you can kill their minion, and you can summon your own. That way you're able to be reactive to your opponent's side of the board, which is incredibly important as Priest, while still developing a minion yourself. This card has less flexibility in that regard. On turn 5, you might just play a 3/4 and resummon your Northshire Cleric or your Wild Pyromancer. And that's not particularly exciting. There's a lot of lower cost cards that could be risky. You might resummon a Doomsayer, right? It all depends on the deck and what Priest is running. You might also get the Injured Blade Master and be pretty happy, in which case you would get a total of 7/11 in stats for 5 mana, which is really good, but I don't actually think it's like totally broken. That's still only 7 attack on the board, and Shaman gets 7 attack on the board for 4 mana with Flame Breathe Faceless. So, the best case scenario in the mid game isn't that good because all of the lower cost minions have to be played first. That said, as you stretch into the late game and you've already played your opponent's Tyrian Forging, you've already dropped Sylvanas, and you start to summon those minions back, or at least have a chance to summon those minions back, Onyx Bishop gets potentially better, but still, it's really slow, and it contributes to a late game style of Priest that Priest is already good at. They're already good at the late game. They have all the answers, the entombs, the deaths, the threats. It's all there, so this card doesn't really help what Priest's real weak point was, which was keeping up in the early to mid game. This is just a sort of non-reactive board presence card that doesn't force your opponent to trade into it. They can just ignore you and hit the face, and this card has accomplished nothing. It's just too slow for the meta, and although not too slow for Priest, ideologically, too slow for what Priest needs right now. So Onyx Bishop, not a terrible card in and of itself. It's a fine card. It has a cool effect. You could get a ton of stats, but just not what Priest needs right now. So I don't think it's going to see all that much play. Up next is another Priest card. This is a 4 mana minion, so another mid-game minion. What Priest really needed was like a good 1 or 2 drop. This does not meet that need. This is Priest of the Feast, and it's a 3/6, which is a pretty good stat allocation for 4 mana. You want 4/5 basically. This is 4/5, but a lot of prominent 4 mana minions have this 3/6, like Water Elemental, for instance, which is really, really good. So the stats here work out fine. It trades really effectively into low-cost boards, like lots of minions. It'll kill all those Shaman totems and all those Zoo minions and trade a couple times. So that's fine. And it does have a pretty interesting effect. Whenever you cast a spell, restore 3 health to your hero. So this is the kind of card that if you play it on turn 4, your opponent starts thinking, I guess I have to kill this. Or he could just heal himself too much, and all my attacks to face will just be wasted because he'll get free heals. So it's a card that's kind of pseudo-taunt, right? It's almost like a 3/6 taunt, but it also has the flexibility in the late game that you can drop it on turn 10 for 4 mana. You can cast 3 or 4 spells, between Circle Healing and Power Word Shield. You could get 4 or 5 spells out, right? So you might be able to heal 12, 15 damage in a single turn in the late game. More likely, you're probably going to heal 3 to 6 damage in any given turn, just depending on how much mana you have. But if this does live on the board, the potential grows, right? So it's almost like an anti-heal bot with better stats, which is pretty interesting. I'm not totally sure that it's what Priest needs. Opponents can trade up into it pretty easily. It just takes 1 power overwhelming to wipe this thing out on turn 4, and you haven't gotten any value because you have to wait until later to really gain it. And I don't think it has like the huge comeback mechanism that a card like Halaziel the Ascended has for Shaman. That card is kind of similar in mentality, right? Do something, heal your hero really big. But that one utilizes typically Shaman board clears like Lightning Storm and Elemental Destruction to heal a ton all at once. You can come back from 2 health all the way back up to 30, all while still addressing your opponent's board very efficiently. Priest doesn't really have the mechanisms to do that. Its board clears, like Excavated Evil for instance, might clear the board, but that's 1 spell, so you only heal 3 health, whereas Shaman could heal like 21 off of an Excavated Evil with Halaziel the Ascended. Now, obviously this is not a legendary, so it's kind of apples and oranges a little bit, but Halaziel the Ascended barely gets played, even as a legendary, and only in a specific set of decks. So why would Priest of the Feast be played if it's not as good? I just don't see this card making an impact. Too slow, too unreliable, doesn't impact the board fast enough. Just exactly what Priest didn't need. Priest has lots of minions just like this, and they didn't need another one tossed in. So let's move on to the last Priest card, which somehow, even though the other 2 were, good to average in a vacuum, but bad for Priest, this one is actually just bad. Just objectively terrible. And the last thing Priest needed was another just really bad card. This is the 2-mana spell Purify, and it silences a friendly minion and draws you a card. So a 2-mana draw a card, that's sort of bad, right? Because you could play a Novice Engineer, you could play a Loot Hoarder, and you could get more value out of it. And it would be the same kind of thing. You'd get a minion, your opponent would have to address it. There's value in those cards. So this 2-mana draw a card looks much worse than just a Novice Engineer or a Loot Hoarder or a Blood Mage Thanos. It looks worse than those. So you think, oh, it must have some upside, some positive upside to make it better than Novice Engineer or Loot Hoarder. But in reality, what's the upside on this card is actually still just a downside. Silence a friendly minion. 99% of the time, that's not something you want to do. You don't want to silence off your Death Rattle effects. You don't want to silence off valuable card effects, like on this guy, for instance. So very rarely are you ever going to want to silence your own minions. You can't silence enemy minions. That would actually be pretty solid. Silence an enemy minion, draw a card. That would be cool, because it would take your silence card that Priest already has at 0 mana, and nobody wants to run because it just doesn't do enough, and it would turn it into a good card, because you'd get the silence and you'd get to basically cycle it out for a new card, and that would be amazing. But this is only able to silence your own minions. So there are a couple applications, right? It's good against freeze effects if somehow you get one giant minion that's frozen by a mage, but how often does that happen? Never. It's also good with a certain set of minions that have negative text effects. Stuff like Ancient Watcher or Eerie Statue from League of Explorers, the 7/7, that can't attack most of the time. And you could silence that and you'd have a 7/7. But I mean, think about this. Eerie Statue's 4 mana for a 7/7. You play Purify to silence it. That's 2 cards, 6 mana to get an attacking 7/7. Shaman does that for 4 mana. Yeah, they have a little bit of overload, so it's sort of similar to 6 mana as well with Flame Wreath Faceless, but it gets to attack instantly. You don't have to have 2 cards to activate that effect. Overload can be removed anyway, so there's like no comparison. Flame Wreath Faceless is 10 times better than Eerie Statue plus Purify, because you have to run an Eerie Statue in your deck, and that's not cool. If the card, I think it's called maybe Wailing Soul, from Naxxramas was still around, and you could like start to piece together a couple different silence cards and build an entire deck out of crazy stuff like that, who knows, maybe it would be good. But Priest loves Death Rattle minions, and minions with really positive card effects, and Purify does not fit that mentality at all. So I don't know what the thinking was with this card. It's not good objectively, just in a vacuum I think it's bad, but it's really bad for Priest. So Blizzard has taken a class that was already at the bottom of the barrel and seems to be rubbing it in with this card. I don't get it. I hope, though, that I'm totally wrong and somebody creates a genius Purify deck that just blows people out of the water, and that Blizzard is a genius, because I want cards to be good. I want them to be successful. I just don't think this one has it. So let's go ahead and move on to the Shaman cards, a couple of which I think are pretty okay. And Shaman didn't really need good cards, but they're still going to get a couple anyway. Starting off with the 1 mana weapon, this is Spirit Claws. It's a 1/3, so a little bit worse than Light's Justice, just based on pure stats, but it has a neat effect, has +2 attack while you have spell damage. So anytime you have a minion on the field that has a plus spell damage effect, so like your totem that has spell damage, Blood Mage Thalnos, for instance, you could run a Kobold Geomancer, I guess, if you really wanted, although that's unlikely. This turns into a 3/3 weapon, which is ridiculous, right? That's way better than Fiery War Axe, and this only costs 1 mana. So here's what I think about this card. I actually think it's really strong, because even as a 1 mana 1/3, it's not bad. If you never get this effect off, it's not a terrible card. Light's Justice is almost playable in Paladin because they don't have a ping effect, and neither does Shaman. Shaman needs a way to do 1 damage sometimes, so you load this up on an empty turn 1. You may not use it for 3 or 4 turns, just waiting for that moment, but then you can strike and it's got an instant value, right? So I don't know if it fits in a super hyper aggro Shaman, but I think it could, especially if you sneak in a couple spell damage minions here and there. But I really think it's better in mid-range Shaman. I'm just giving you some value that you can bank for later, essentially load it up on turn 1, which might be empty, and then use that value later in the game to either hit something for 3 or hit something for 1. But any Totem Shaman, too, could utilize this card, because the more likely you are to have Totems out, the more likely you are to get that spell damage, particularly with a card like Tuskar Totemic that has a chance to summon your spell damage totem plus your hero power, all of which plays into Thing from Below and all those other Totem synergy cards. So very playable card. Ton of upside. The 3/3's nuts. A 1/3 is good. It's not perhaps as good as N'Zoth's First Mate for Warrior, because they do get the 1/1 minion, but I think the potential upside here makes up for that and makes it a very strong, kind of scary card, because Shaman didn't really need yet another way to hit stuff. One last thing I should mention is that Shaman sometimes has trouble doing 4 damage without running Stormcrack, and some people run Stormcrack, but not everybody wants to. This plus Rockbiter is 4 damage. Rockbiter by itself is 3 damage. I think that's actually a significant difference, just having the option to hit those 4 damage Rockbiters from time to time, or, of course, also the 6 damage Rockbiters, which seem less relevant, but that's always a possibility as well. So I really like Spirit Claws. I think it's going to see play in a couple different versions of Shaman. Moving on to another card I think is solid, but I don't know if it's going to be played, and that's the Maelstrom Portal. This 2 mana spell does 1 damage to all enemy minions, so it's not a whirlwind effect. It's basically an arcane explosion, Twilight Flame Caller effect, 1 just to the opponent's side of the board, and you summon a random 1-cost minion. So as far as like raw value is concerned, that's really good. I mean, you get a good minion, or not a good minion, but you get a minion and a good spell effect that only impacts your opponents. So it's, it's the kind of card that can tidy up after a lightning storm. We've all had those lightning storms that just everything was left with 1 health. Some stuff rolled 2, some stuff rolled 3, everything had 1 health, and you need another card to finish it off, and you don't want to use your second lightning storm. You don't have a ping effect, so you need a card like this to just clean up, and you still get a minion back as well, which is always nice for Shaman. They typically like to have minions out on the board. So in theory, it's really quite strong. It's better than other cards like it. Dresses the board, summons your own board, Although one cost minions on average are pretty bad. In fact, most of them are pretty terrible. But, you know, if you do get the 2/1 that trades up into something, you're pretty happy. So, it's a good card as far as just the stats and the mechanism is concerned. But I just don't know that it's good enough to squeeze its way into Shaman decks that are currently pretty well refined and pretty strong. But I wouldn't be surprised to see if it ran as a one-of, just to deal with the occasional zoo board or to clean up after lightning storms like I mentioned. So it has the potential to be a very playable card. And then finally, my last card in this review is the Wicked Witch Doctor, the final Shaman card. A 4-mana minion that has 3/4 in stats. And as if Shaman needed another way to summon totems, that's exactly what this card does. But this time around through spell synergy, whenever you cast a spell, summon a random basic totem. Now basic totem means your hero power totems, so one of the 4 hero power totems here. And that little line, basic totem, I think makes this card pretty bad. Well, I shouldn't say pretty bad, but not awfully good. Unlike Tuskar Totemic, which always gets you just reasonable value because you get a 3-attack minion and whatever totem, and then occasionally it just wins the game with the free totem golem or the free mana tie or the free flame tongue, because that's just a ridiculous play. This card does not have that upside or that swing potential. None of the basic totems are game winning ever. It's got some clear totem synergies with cards like Thing from Below. But right now, Shaman doesn't have trouble getting Thing from Below out. It's not like they need more totems to make Thing from Below viable. So I don't really know that this card is going to open up any new avenues for Shaman. Does it make Totemic Might good? No, I don't think it does. I don't think it changes how Shamans are built or played. And the stats on its own aren't good enough. I mean, usually you're going to get a 3/6 for 4, but the 0/2 is much worse than just having this as a 3/6. Sometimes you'll get the 1/1 for a 4/5, which is a little better maybe. But in reality, I just don't think this card has the stats. It's a little too slow. It's not doing what Shaman typically tries to do, which is just overwhelm your opponent with raw value and just force, right? Force of will with giant scary stuff. And this is a little slower, a little less impactful, and just doesn't feel OP like a lot of the Shaman cards that we've seen in the past do. But I hope I'm wrong and somebody puts together a Totemic Might list that's built around Wicked Witch Doctor. I should say, by the way, that all of that was basically on the condition that even if this summoned it guaranteed, it would still not be good. But you actually have to cast a spell to summon the totem. So there are instances, right, where you could cast 4 or 5 spells and get 4 or 5 totems. And that might sound crazy, but it's still not good. And maybe with Primal Fusion you could do some sort of trickery, right? But you don't need 4 or 5 totems most of the time. They don't do anything. They just sit on the board. So without some sort of capacity to make them active or valuable, I just don't get it. I mean, plus, Shaman doesn't have that many cheap spells that it can just cast. It's not like Priest that has Power Word Shields that it's just happy to pump out forever. It has spells that react in the right moment, so it's hard to string together all that. I just don't think this card has it. It's not good if you cast 1 spell. It's not good if you cast 5 because your board's too full. And trying to build like an Evolve or Primal Fusion deck with this card as the centerpiece that evolves a bunch of totems or whatever, it's just not impactful enough. It's too slow. It's a multi-card combo that's very inconsistent. So I think most of the time you're going to get 1 totem or 0 totems, and occasionally maybe 2 totems, and still that's not valuable. It's just not good. So I don't really feel Wicked Witch Doctor is going to be played in Shaman. It has too many good cards right now. So that said, that wraps it up for this review. We've got a good card that's not going to be played, an average card that won't be played, a terrible card that won't be played, good card that will be played, an average card that could be played, and I guess an average card that won't be played. So all around, couple highlights and a lot of lowlights for Priest. If you have any comments or thoughts on these cards, you know where to leave them. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.